Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Kamu and welcome to another video. Many of you asked me whether I could make another crafting guide on epics, and that's what I do now. For anybody who is not interested and only wants to see the newest meta decks, I will upload a video tomorrow where I will show you another deck which I think is absolutely amazing. But right now let's just focus on the silver cards and which ones I would craft if I made a new account and didn't have anything already. So let's dive into the neutrals first. And actually, I think the best cards should be, when it comes to neutral, cards that are used in many decks or can be used in many decks and are decent. And the first that comes to my mind is the Roach. And the Roach is a unit which spawns from your deck when you play a golden card, and even though it got nerfed to 4, I think it's a card that can be played in any deck and is always solid. So if you don't have a specific type of deck that you really want to play and where you need specific silver cards for that, I think Roach is definitely a good card to craft. Also, when it comes to the neutral, very many decks, for example the X-Men Skellige deck or Northern Realms with the Reaver Hunters or Scoia'tael with the Protectors, they all use operators some of the time. So this is also a card that comes when the meta is right. We see operators all the time. For example, also you can use it in Monster Consume, and there it's also very, very solid. Another card that I think is always solid and can be included in any deck is Skellige Storm. Skellige Storm is a weather card which is put on one row, and it does 3, 2, and 1 damage. So it can make up to 6 damage. And usually you play it on 1 minion and it does 3 damage over time. Your opponent has to play golden card, which is in most cases not optimal. And I think this is really a solid card. So if you craft this one and put it in your starter decks, that's definitely a good choice. Also, a card that is used frequently is Decoy. Decoy returns an ally to your hand and it's strengthened by 3 and replay it. So you basically replay a battle cry or something that has an effect as soon as you play it on the board. So as soon as you deploy it, with 3 strengths. So if you play it, for example, on a mage or a Sigdrifa, it's pretty solid. So this card is frequently used in many decks, and that's definitely a good choice. Also, a card that I really like is the Alsos Double Cross. It's this one. It pulls out a unit from your deck and it strengthens it. And for example, you can pull an operator. You can pull, for example, a Morkvarg or an Olgierd in a Skellige deck, and I think this card is really good. I think it's really, really good. I think when it comes to the neutral, there are notable mentions, like for example the White Frost, which is played in the Skellige X-Men deck. Unfortunately, it's only played in X-Men Skellige. Same applies to the Aeromancy. Also, the Bacchus Twisted Mirror is a very interesting card and sometimes extremely strong card, but it's very situational and actually, as far as I know, only played in monster weather decks. So that is a card you can craft if you have scraps left, and if you get it in a keg, you should definitely pick it. And yeah, another one would be Olgierd. Olgierd is used in Skellige right now, and I think it's a break-even silver card. I think if you put it in any deck, it's actually a solid card. Usually you don't put it in any deck because there are some options that are just better, but I think if you put it in a deck, it will be definitely decent. And yeah, another card, the last neutral card that I would recommend is Scourge. Yeah, because Scourge is played in Skellige or in any spell deck, and it's played in weather monster deck, and sometimes in some other cards, in some other decks. It's not super good, but it's definitely solid. So let's come to the monsters. When it comes to the monsters, I think the crafting order or the pick order is pretty clear. First, you need the crowns. If you deploy one of them, she will pull the other two off from your deck, and these are 20 instants, 20 points, and that's just insane. And they thin your deck, and they have been a staple in the monsters decks for an incredibly long amount of time because they're just so strong. So these are probably the best monster cards. I think then the next best card is the Fiend. The Fiend is a toggle card, a lock card, and it also damages the unit which is locked by half of their power, and it's 5 stats by herself, so or itself. And when you think about lock units, usually they are around 7 stats, but this is 5 plus that does a lot of damage. So this is definitely a top-notch card, and I would play it over, for example, the Dona on Hinder in Skellige. I think this is the best lock unit in this game. Another very notable mention is the Water Hag. The Water Hag is the mage of the monsters, and it can spawn Torrential Rain, Clear Skies, and Lacerate. I think these are all very, very good options, and this is probably, together with Vanemar, the best mage. So this is a very good card that you can craft, and you should pick if there is not a better option, and there won't be very often. Another card I think that's used in like almost or every monster deck, and that's Katakan. And Katakan consumes a unit from either graveyard, which makes him usually around 14 stats, maybe 15, plus he can kill a unit or consume a unit, or I mean banish a unit, which is maybe very important for your opponent. For example, against Skellige, you can just eat their graveyard from, and you can X-Mens. Or against Northern Realms, you can eat River Hunters. So this card is also very good. So these are the 6 cards that I would play in most monster decks. Of course, you can play the Toad, or the Monster Nest, or the Grave Hag, but these are really rarely used. And I think the other cards are simply better, unless there is some like special deck. Then, for example, the monster deck is getting used in some monster consume decks, but not in weather decks. Same for Grave Hag. So yeah, you can play them, but the others are better. So let's get to Nilfgaard. When it comes to Nilfgaard, I think the best cards are pretty clear. The absolute best silver card is Joachim de Wet. If you deploy him, play a top loyal bronze or silver unit in your deck and boost it by 10. So it's basically a bronze card plus 5 stats, and that should actually be a golden card. Of course, it's boosted, so it's damageable, for example, with Madrim and something like that, but still this card is pure nuts. The same applies to Vanemar. He is the mage of the Nilfgaard, and together with the Water Hag, the best mage. And he spawns a Biting Frost, Clear Skies, or Stammelfoil's Tremor, and usually you want to use Stammelfoil's Tremor for 16 stats. And that makes him 19. So this card is absolutely insane. Another card that I would recommend is the Ox. He's the only unit that can lock 2 units. And therefore he's only 4 stats. But I think it's really good. I think it's a very good card, and you see it in all Nilfgaard decks. So if you want to play Nilfgaard, this is one card that you definitely want to craft. When it comes to the other 2 cards, I think the next one would be Cantrella. It's the Nilfgaard Spy, and I think it's actually the best spy because it's not only the spy with the lowest amount of stats, but it's also a spy in a Nilfgaard deck. So Nilfgaard has very good synergy with spies. So this is not 10 stats, but it's much lower. So I think Cantrell is a very good card that you should include in Skellige decks. When it comes to the other silver cards, there is the Peter. It got nerfed from 6 to 4. I think in the current meta with so many X-Men Skellige decks, I think this is a good card. But it's very situational. So if you put him in your deck, it's definitely good. It's definitely not bad. But there might be some times where this is not the best include. The same is true for Asirvar on a hit. I think if you play it the right way, for example, if you mill your own deck and you draw almost all cards, then you play Asirvar on a hit and Ka here, I think this is a good card. But again, it's only for a specific type of deck. So this is a good card to craft, but not necessary. So let's come to the Northern Realms. When it comes to Northern Realms, whoever wants to play it should definitely craft Death Mold. He's a mage, so he's pretty good. He's definitely not the best mage, because he can only spawn Rain, Clear Skies, and also Thunder. But since it's a mage, and mages are so versatile, you should definitely play him. Another very good card, and I think almost necessary in all Northern Realms deck, and I don't see any Northern Realms deck without her, is Nenneke. And she can shuffle up to 3 cards from your graveyard into your deck, so if you have, for example, a trio combo, then you can play it in round 2, round 1, and then you can replay it by using the Nenneke. Or for example, if you play the Witchers, you can reshuffle them into your deck. And that's also a very strong combo. I think very often I see Reinforcement, and I play it myself, and I think it's good in combo decks. It's not good by itself, but right now there are only Northern Realms combo decks, and there it is a very solid card. Another card that I think is really good for starter decks is usually the Skellige de Transarville, because what she does is she plays a bronze special card from your hand and draws another one. So this is basically a bronze card plus 6 stats, and that's usually insane. And I think she's underrated right now. I think personally that she's really good, and I think you can include her in any deck that has at least 3 to 4 bronze spells. Another card that is good is the Thaler, because it's a spy. And spies are always see play. It really depends on the meta. It's really situational, but usually if you play a spy, it's always fine. It's not the best card, but it's not the worst. And another notable mention is the Margarita. She is the lock unit, and she resets a unit. I think she's probably the worst lock unit, but it's a lock unit, and it's probably better than Cleaver. So yeah, if I would play Northern Realms and I didn't have any other options, I think you can definitely put her in your deck. When it comes to Scoia'tael, I definitely would recommend, of course, also the Ida Emean, because she's the mage of this faction. Of course, she is the worst mage, because she can only spawn Fog, Clear Skies, or Gwent Sign. But usually, she is played in all Scoia'tael decks, but Scoia'tael. And I think she's totally fine, because again, she's a mage, and she's 4 stats. So if you get her, you should be happy. Another card that I would definitely craft is the Dennis Cranmer. Usually there are only 2 types of Scoia'taels right now, and that's the Dwarf Scoia'tael and the Skellige. And in Dwarf, this is a core card, because it strengthens all other bronze and silver dwarfs in your deck and hand and on your side of the board, which makes him probably like 15 stats. And that makes him a real powerhouse in this deck. Other very important card is the Arpin. He has Resilience, and that's usually what you play in a dwarf deck. Especially if you buff him and he doesn't get removed, that's really, really good for you. So these cards are really core for a dwarf deck. When it comes to the Barclay Elves, when you deploy him, you play a random bronze or silver dwarf from your deck and boost it by 3. That makes it actually solid. It's not super good, but it's solid. I think usually you play him. I think he's 2 stats, so actually he's 5 stats plus a random dwarf. Actually, it's pretty good. So you can definitely craft him too if you play a dwarf deck. When it comes to the Scoia'tael deck, there are 2 cards really important here, and that's the Nature's Gift, which if you play it, you can play a bronze or a silver card from your deck. So you have the choice and you can select which card you play. So this is usually played in all Scoia'taels and also the Yevon. And the Yevon is a spy, a 12 stat spy, which is not really good, but in Scoia'tael you only want to deliver your opponent's stats. And that makes him a core card of this deck. So especially as a beginner, I think Scoia'tael is a really interesting deck, and I think it's really fun to play. Even though I hate it to play against it, I think it's really fun to play. And so these are cards that I would craft because Scoia'tael, you should have played him at least once in your lifetime. Another notable card is the Scoia'tael. It's the toggle card of Scoia'tael, and you might argue that it's the best card because the best luck card because it's 8 stats. And I think it's worse than the Fiend, but I think it's better than the others. So I think you can do nothing wrong with this guy. There are also notable mentions, which are the Moran, the Teruviel, and the Brian, and I think they are good cards, but right now their archetype isn't played because it's too weak. So I would wait for another patch. I think it has potential, and these cards, if I would get them in kegs, I wouldn't be unhappy. I would actually be happy, but I would then wait for another patch so that you can play them. So let's finish with the last faction, and that's right now the strongest faction of them all, and therefore all the silver cards that I would recommend are real powerhouses. First of all, the Morkvak. It's a unit that if you discard it, it gets resurrected all the time, and this is definitely a core card of any Skellige deck. It's seen in any Skellige deck. Another core card is the Gramist. It's of course the mage of Skellige, and it's an extremely strong mage because it can not only spawn a fog, which is extremely good in an X-Men deck, it can also of course spawn Clear Skies and Blood-Curdling Roar. And Blood-Curdling Roar on a Freya is extremely good because it's 11 stats plus he is 3 by himself. So only this spell is by itself 14 stats, and you have all the other options. So this is one of the best mages. You definitely should craft him and definitely should pick him. Another very good powerhouse is Sigdrifa. She's can resurrect a unit, but she's 3 in stats. And she can also resurrect a silver card. So get a silver card, for example, the Gramist, plus 3 stats, which makes it, super good. Dona Einhinder is a really good lock card. It's on average 7 stats, but it discards a random bronze card from your opponent's deck. And you can really destroy some strategies from your opponent. For example, if you played against Scoia'tael and you discard a protector, that's just insane. So this is also a staple in most Skellige decks, actually probably in all Skellige decks. So another card that I would recommend is the Holger Blackhand. It's 6 plus 5 damage by itself, so 11 damage, 11 stats, but 5 on the opponent's board, which is usually and break-even silver card. But he can also buff a unit in our graveyard, and since we resurrect a lot, this makes this card really, really decent. And Udalric, because this is a card that is played in X-Men decks, and right now X-Men decks are pretty good. And you play it in any X-Men deck because in X-Men decks you want your opponent to have stats on board so that your X-Men get buffed. And that is what he does. And usually X-Men decks are exponential, so they usually have, after 5 cards played in one round, very often like 30 or 40 stats more than our opponent. And therefore you have room for Udalric. And yeah, I think this card is really, really good. So these are my recommendation. I hope that you now have a broader overview of which silver cards are good or bad and which you should craft or pick in kegs, especially as a beginner. And yeah, I think if you liked it, please leave a like and leave a comment. And if you want more content, then please subscribe to stay tuned. And what's left to say is have a great day and bye.